show, the Believe in Ole Miss podcast, of course, brought to you by our good friends, Debbie Johnson Realty and T. White. I have a very special guest today, Chris Doering of the SEC Network, kind enough to give us a few minutes today. And Chris, quite topical to have you on, as there's a game in Oxford on Saturday that I know you'll be paying very close attention to. But thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, I tell you what, man. I was mentioning to you before I came on. There's not much more that I love than being on our football final show on Saturday nights, having everybody finish their Saturday game days with us. But being in Oxford on Saturday would be one place that I would love to have the opportunity to be. I love Oxford anyway, but Florida and Ole Miss, two of my favorite programs playing one another, would be nice to be there.
Well, we'll get to Ole Miss and Florida and the season soon enough. But since we've got you, I'd love to take you back to high school and, growing up there in Gainesville, probably an easy decision to play for the Gators. But what people may not know, second-team All-American, but you were a walk-on. That was phenomenal for me to find that out. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Gainesville and choosing to play for the Gators.
Yeah, so I grew up here, born here, lived here all through my high school years, and my parents both Florida graduates, so lived and died orange and blue, and went to not only every football game, but basketball, baseball, gymnastics, everything in my life revolved around Florida athletics. And so, I always had dreams of playing at Florida. Chris Collinsworth was my idol when he was a Gator, and followed him throughout his Florida and Cincinnati Bengal career and into the broadcasting world. So, I had always thought it was going to come to fruition where I'd get that chance to play for Florida. It didn't quite have the same path that I expected. I tell everybody I had the greatest high school career of any high school student ever. I got a chance to be all-state in football, basketball, and baseball. We won the state basketball tournament. I was the MVP of the state basketball finals, and I got to be Sky Masterson in the musical theater production of Guys and Dolls. So I got a chance to do everything in high school, and yet you mentioned it. The decision was easy. The decision was easy where I wanted to play, but not a whole lot of other people wanted me anywhere else. So I didn't really have scholarship offers to any other school. So walking on at Florida was kind of the best option at the time, which I'm grateful that it was something where I wasn't given a scholarship somewhere else, because I probably would have taken it. And in the end, this was not only the opportunity to live out a childhood dream, but one that caused me to earn it and appreciate it a little bit more when I was given that scholarship and ultimately had the success I did at Florida.
It's very fitting we're talking to you today. There's a linebacker that plays for Ole Miss. Not a lot of people know about. His name is Andrew Jones, number 44. And he's gotten a lot of play as of the last couple of games because Lane made mention, I asked him, where did Andrew Jones come from? He was a graduate transfer from Grambling. And all of a sudden he's playing a ton at weak side linebacker. And Lane basically said, well, we couldn't get him off the field in practice. And when we couldn't get him off the field in practice, he was making so many plays, we put him in the game. Then all of a sudden we can't get him out off the field in the game. How was that process for you walking on as a freshman? You're redshirted, and then, as you say, the rest is history. The Hall of Fame, you made it to the NFL, second-team All-American. You had an incredible career, but I'd love to go back to when you were a freshman. You kind of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and now all of a sudden, a couple of years later, you're a stalwart in the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best part of life sometimes is not knowing the challenges you're going to face before you face them, right? If you knew the path was going to be as difficult as it sometimes ends up being, maybe we would choose something easier. But for me, I dreamt about being a Gator. And so getting a chance to put that uniform on and run out there on the field was a dream come true. And I think it's even more so true today. Very few players know the history and know the former players and have the same emotional investment in the program they play for. But for me, I could speak to all the history. I could speak to the struggle of losing, the key games when Florida needed to try to win an SEC championship. And so to get a chance to be there during that run under Coach Spurrier was really special. But again, it caused me to have to work a little harder, prove myself more. And then, ultimately when you get those things, you don't take them for granted. And it kind of set the course for the rest of my life. I got drafted. You said I was second team All-American, first team All SEC, held the career touchdown record for 25 years in the league. And yet, I was supposed to be drafted in the third or fourth round, according to Mel Kiper. I didn't go until the sixth round. In 10 years in the NFL, I got cut 22 different times. I got cut 10 different times. I got moved across the country 22 different times. So all these things happen where you learn a skill or learn an ability to persevere that sets you up for the next place in life. And I really feel like that's what happened in Florida, that set me on the course to the NFL, and then beyond what I'm doing in the broadcasting world, what I do in the business world here in the mortgage office I have as well.
You know, it's funny. You talk about how much you grew and learned so much as a younger athlete there at Florida. And then all of a sudden, 1993 happens. You playing against Kentucky, what many would call the catch. Can you walk me through that game? You went 24-20. Your quarterback's Danny Werfel. Take me through that offensive progression, because you caught a lot of big balls in your career, but that one kind of stands out to a lot of people, especially some kids in Mississippi that watched you play.
Let me start back a little earlier. I'll take you through the history because I walked on in 1991. Got redshirted that year. In '92, I made the travel squad, so I was one of the top 8 receivers. Caught my first pass against Tennessee in a blowout loss there in Knoxville to the Vols. And then the next year, going through two-a-days, we're in the middle of camp, and after the morning practice, coach calls the team up and makes the announcement that he's putting me on scholarship. At that point, I thought, man, this is amazing. The coolest part about it was my teammates were more happy than I was, and that showed to me that they recognized the sacrifice and the work that I had put in to get that scholarship. And then, we played the first game of the season a couple of weeks later, catch 4 passes in a big win over a directional school. The next week, September 11th, 1993, we go to Kentucky. Coach Spurrier tells me before the game I'm starting, and here I am. I went from a walk-on a couple weeks earlier to now starting in SEC play. Catch my first career touchdown reception in the beginning of the fourth quarter, and I thought that was the pinnacle of everything that I dreamt of as a kid. Here I am, playing for my childhood team, catching a touchdown in the SEC competition, and little did I know I'd have a game-winning catch with 3 seconds left that would kind of change my entire life. I caught 29 touchdowns after that, but the one that everybody kind of associates Chris Doering with was the game winner in Lexington that night. And so it was a life-changing catch. You go to class on Monday and seeing my name in headlines in the school newspaper, people are recognizing me. I got a professor that's talking about Chris Doering and what a great story of overcoming obstacles and persevering. And he had no idea I was even in his class. So it was literally an example of overnight success and fame and recognition.
Do you remember? And I'd love to take you back. You caught the touchdown against Kentucky. You overcome so much walking on. Do you remember that first conversation you had with your family, uh, who are lifelong Gators, when you caught the touchdown pass? And I'd love to get your thoughts on how special it was to share that with them.
Yeah, well, my parents happened to be there that night, and my parents didn't miss many of my games ever throughout my childhood and high school careers. So they were there that night, and unfortunately, my mom didn't see it. I guess she had her head in her hands when the play occurred, so she didn't get a chance to see it live, although she was there. And obviously, you think about the number of hours that my parents spent supporting me. My dad throwing the football with me out in the street. As a kid, my dad would take me over to Florida Field, and you used to be able to go on the field with it was AstroTurf, and we'd kick field goals, and I'd act like I was Chris Collinsworth. So there was really a lot of investment from my parents there as well. Obviously, we all want our kids to be successful, but I could see how for them, as much as they put in the time and effort to drive me around to the boys club or the city league games or whatever we were doing, and watching me play for the school they went to that they brought me up loving, and then to have the chance to catch something like that while they were there, just a really special moment.
The fun of following him from afar. I'd love to know what was it like playing for Coach Spurrier, the relationship that you're able to form with him, and I
Yeah.
can only imagine walking on to becoming a second team All American there. That relationship probably was really cool and probably continues to this day.
Yeah, it does for sure. Outside of my parents, there's nobody that has been more influential and impactful than Coach Spurrier has been in my life. And I talk all the time about coaches are basically teachers, right? I mean, football is a vehicle for teaching kids about life, all the lessons that you can learn. And Coach Spurrier may have coached, a couple thousand people in his career, but that reach, it, you know, my kids are being indirectly coached by Coach Spurrier because of the lessons that I learned. The people that work for me here in the mortgage office are being inspired by things that inspired me from Coach Spurrier. So, like, I don't think great coaches are more than wins and losses. Great coaches are ones that help shape great adults that can help impact so many other people in their communities. And I feel like that's what Coach Spurrier was. The great thing about Coach is that he didn't care if you were a walk-on or a scholarship guy. He wanted guys that would play the way that they were coached. And he would talk an awful lot about John Wooden and some of the Woodenisms. And one of the things that he said is that you talk about players that coaches love are guys that play the way they're coached and that are in phenomenal condition. And I think I caught his attention as a freshman when I won the conditioning test, blew the field away. And from that point, he knew who I was more. And I think the consistency with which I practiced, the way that I was able to execute the things that he had taught in the meeting rooms, on the practice field, those are the things that got me the opportunity. And then once the opportunity presented itself, fortunately, I took advantage of it and never looked back. In my senior year, I caught 17 touchdowns. I was, first team All SEC, second team All American. I remember hearing an interview where when I broke the record, the SEC record, they asked Coach Spurrier if he was surprised by that. And he said, "No, I'm the one calling the plays." And so he was calling the plays for me, knowing that he had confidence that I was going to make the plays when given the opportunity. And that really meant a lot to me.
Yeah, Devontae Smith broke that record back in 2020. Of course, he played for Alabama. That was an incredible record, all kind of Gator records that you had. I'd love to ask you, too, looking at Florida, the football program, here in Mississippi, we began following it in the early 90s. Shane Matthews, the quarterback from down in Pascagoula, would choose to go to Florida. So all of us kids in Mississippi would kind of begin following Florida. And then all of a sudden, here comes Spurrier. Here come all the winning, Danny Werfel. And then all of a sudden, to win the national championship and kind of the ball rolls along. You mentioned Chris Collinsworth, and I want to touch on this real quick. Any relationship there? Because I know you mentioned him twice, and he obviously made an impact on you, both on the field and in the booth.
Yeah, I got a chance. There's a picture of me with him probably when I'm 5 or 6 years old at fan photo day on the field. We've kind of stayed in touch over the years. When I caught the game winner, he sent a telegram, which, can you imagine the days when people were sending telegrams, but the telegram said, "Hey, Chris, congratulations. I thought you were trying to be like me. You better start dropping more." I can remember it, vividly right now, and just very self-deprecating. But this is a guy that was a great role model for me and what he did playing at Florida, playing at Cincinnati, getting into broadcasting. I feel like I've followed in his footsteps a lot. And even today, he's one of the preeminent broadcasters in all of sports and does such a great job that there's, if I could emulate just a tenth of what he's doing and the success he's having, it would be amazing.
Yeah, going back to the Florida job, it's seen its ups and downs, and this whole new world that you talk about every Saturday on the SEC network panel, which is fantastic. By the way, I told you off air that it's akin to
Thank you.
back when Chris Berman and Tom Jackson did primetime. I mean, it's kind of the show that we all watch. For people like me that I'm tuned in, I'm at a game every single Saturday. Well, the first thing I do when I get home is flip on the network so I can kind of get caught up on the day. And it's a perfect 30-minute encapsulation. You and the entire crew do a great job breaking the games down. You bet. In any event, the Florida job is, like I said, seen its ups and downs, the new world of NIL. Where, in your opinion, is that job right now on the mountain of jobs in the SEC? And they're kind of in limbo right now with Scott Strickland, a new coach, Lane Kiffin, insert coach here. Where is the job right now to you?
I still think Florida is one of the best jobs in the country. I look at it's changed, right? People talk about, well, this school has won championships more recently. I don't think that even matters anymore. I mean, we're watching Indiana and Vanderbilt have chances to get into the college football playoff field, sooner than some of the blue bloods in this league will have a chance to do so. I think it comes down to commitment. We talked about the commitment from the athletic department down in terms of what they're allocating to coaches pool, the assistants, what they're allocating to recruiting. Now there's a little bit more structure with the congressional settlement and what schools are paying, but the allocation, that percentage of what they're allowed to spend on athletes, how it's given to football versus other sports is another factor. I think the city itself, where Gainesville, no state tax in Florida, the weather, the proximity to some of the best football players in high school in the entire country. That's a big part of it as well. So I still think that Florida is one of the best jobs around, and it's just back to being a little bit of a sleeping dog the way it was before Coach Spurrier took over.
Yeah. Chris, on the teleconference today, as we record on Wednesday, the teleconference today, Lane Kiffin made mention that 5 coaches that had some of the toughest schedules in the country are now fired. Are we reaching a point in the world of college football to where this is kind of going to level out with the buyouts being crazy, with we have to win immediately or you're getting fired? The winning percentages are just out the roof. We've seen Brian Kelly get let go. We've seen in your case there at Florida, Dan Mullen was let go with in large part a pretty good winning percentage up against other jobs. Do you think at some point we're going to kind of level some things out with buyouts and coaches having these incredible expectations?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously talking a lot about that as it relates to the dynamic in Baton Rouge with
Yeah.
when the governor's getting involved in Louisiana, talking about, we got to change the structure of how coaches are compensated and eliminate these buyouts and shorten the length of the contract. I don't know who, in terms of the top coaches out there, is going to want to go take that job with as much dysfunction as it seems like there is around it currently. So maybe they have to go with a young up and comer that doesn't require as much of a buyout. Somebody's got to change the landscape, set the precedent. I just don't see it. As long as these boosters want to win, they're going to put the money forth to get the best coaches, and when it's not working, to pay the buyouts. And so again, I go back to Indiana. If Kurt Cignetti or Clark Lee at Vanderbilt can have success now, that even further ramps up the sense of urgency that I think some of the bigger programs have, and the impatience that the boosters that support those programs have.
Chris, I want to take you back 5 years, 2020. And Lane Kiffin was coaching down in Florida. At this place, it was Florida Atlantic, and could not, for the most part, get the pick of the litter. There were a couple of places that he might have landed, but he chose Ole Miss over Arkansas. Now, I'm not kidding. I think I counted 8 different major jobs, both NFL and college, that Lane was at the top of the list. Not necessarily where's he going to coach, but what have you enjoyed seeing Lane evolve over the last 5 years? And what are some things that have jumped out to you, maybe off the field and on the field, that you've seen him grow as a head coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a great pairing between Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. I give Ole Miss a lot of credit for taking a chance, and it doesn't seem like it now, but they were taking a chance on him at the time. With a lot of moving around from him, and the reputation that he gained at Alabama, and people not necessarily feeling like he was the most stable candidate. They took a chance on him. They supported him. Keith Carter has done a great job of giving him every resource he needed to be successful. So, I don't know what happens with him in the future, but I do know that I've watched him kind of grow up, and I know everybody's seen the documentaries and all, but I just remember, the showman that he was, the grab your popcorn, the go for it on fourth down every single time. It was careless, and I think he's become much more mature in the way that he coaches. Now, we saw some I don't think you can completely eliminate that bug out of you. We saw it against Oklahoma, where they throw Austin Simmons in for no reason down inside the 5-yard line on a couple plays, or you go for it on 4th and 1 at your own 25. But I do think he's become more measured in the chances that he takes. Looking at it at the end of the LSU game, running the football the way that they did, kicking field goals at times, and not necessarily trying to score touchdowns every possession. So I do think that he's grown up in the way that he approaches coaching the in-game situations, and the way that he relates to his players. I think there's a real bond there that has been created. And he's talked about it, how he looked at his dad, and the way that his former players talked about his dad after he passed. It just, I think he's finding, deeper meaning in having real relationships now, as opposed to maybe relationships that were helped to get him to the next place in the coaching climb.
I had a conversation this morning on an interview, and someone asked me about this particular Ole Miss team, so I'll ask you. One thing that I kind of said was, you date back to the 1997 Tennessee game. our Tennessee football team with Peyton Manning at quarterback. They had this incredible roster. Obviously, we know they would lose games, not win the national championship. The following year, it's kind of a rebuild. T. Martin, national championship. Not to
Yep.
say by any stretch that Ole Miss is going to win the national championship this year, but last year the roster was loaded and Jackson Dart and had everything in front of you. Lose Kentucky, LSU, and, of course, Florida. This year, it feels like that's not the case. Ole Miss has won those close games, maybe not as talented a roster, but here they are set with only one loss. That's to Georgia,
Yeah.
with the world in front of them, with Florida and Mississippi State in a possible playoff berth. What does this team, what have they done this year to only lose the one game? What has stood out to you, and what do they have to do over the next couple of weeks to try to get into that college football playoff?
You're right. I mean, when Jackson Dart decided to return and everybody else kind of fell in line, it felt like, the college version of The Last Dance, where everybody, hey,
Yeah.
we're all in. It's playoff or bust. And then, you lose that game at home to Kentucky. You lose late in the season at Florida, and those, playoff hopes are dashed. I do think there was a lot of pressure when you have that much, riding on the season. It felt like, at times they were very stiff and playing scared at times. Well, I think this year they haven't had that. I mean, obviously going through that disappointment has helped, Coach Kiffin and the coaches on the staff as well. I think approach things differently. They found lightning in a bottle with Trinidad Chambliss, unexpected, leader of that team now. There was a lot of talent there, I think, and everybody thinks of Lane Kiffin being as the portal king, but I also think he does a great job of recruiting high school kids and building a foundation. That defensive line has a lot of players. I said it early in the season. You may not know the names, but there are a lot of quality players on that defensive line. And I think there's something special. I've been on teams that are well connected, and Vanderbilt's a connected team. But I also think this Ole Miss group is very well connected. They like each other and play hard for one another as well.
Chris, before we get you out of here, thanks again for joining us. It's been
Yeah.
a great conversation. What are you expecting on Saturday? And what's it going to take for the Gators under Coach Billy Gonzalez to get a win? And what are you kind of expecting from Ole Miss over the next couple of weeks with Florida and Mississippi State in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be hard for Florida coming off that disappointing loss to Georgia. I thought it was going to be hard with, all that's happened for them to get their energy level back up. They look like they quit in that one. I don't think they'll quit in this. This is a great challenge, and I'm sure a lot of people talking about where Lane Kiffin's going to be next year, and it very well could be an audition for some of these guys in a way. So I expect Florida to play hard. I think they've got a really talented roster, and that's what's been so frustrating for Florida fans, is that they have so many good players. They just haven't been able to put it together. You've seen moments of it, but haven't seen it for a full 60 minutes. I don't expect Florida to win this game, but I do think that they'll be much more competitive than they were on Saturday against Kentucky.
He's Chris Doering, does a fantastic job on the SEC Network. All-American wide receiver at Florida, played in the National Football League, and kind enough to join us here for a couple minutes today. Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. I enjoyed it, man.